So I have a bold and audacious plan to install WHITEFIRE into my short wheelbase Jaguar XJ. So this is a 2011 model. Having done a little bit of research, what had occurred to me was that the framework and structure that sits behind the headliner up here is the same for those which have WHITEFIRE fitted and those which don't have WHITEFIRE fitted. The big difference is this nice headliner material that you can see above me needs a hole cutting in it, and then the module should, in theory, slot straight in. Then I've got the next tricky little bit of this job, which is getting the cable that plugs into that module to run all the way down sideways across the headliner and then all the way backwards back to the passenger side rear part of the headliner here. Then it's going to have to go down behind the seat to where I believe the fitting point is, and then it'll connect into a connector there. So the first thing to do is to be absolutely bold and brave and cut a hole in the headliner, my beautiful perfect headliner that's got nothing wrong with it, in order to figure out what's under there and whether my theory holds true. If it doesn't, what I'm going to have to do is fix that mess. So the WHITEFIRE module fits on the central stanchion between the two panoramic sunroof openings. What I've done is I've closed the blinds down on both sides, because when I start cutting, I don't want to accidentally cut through and do any damage to the fabric that's sitting underneath there. And as you can see, what I've done is I've cut a first small hole. So I know that this hole is not going to be seen if this job is successful. The reason it won't be seen is because I have measured out a template. That's the size and length of the slot which is normally cut in the headliner for a car where the WHITEFIRE is fitted at the factory. But as you can see, the actual slot is going to be considerably smaller than the hole that would normally cut into one of these headliners. What I want to see is what's beneath there. What you've got is some fabric, some soft fabric. Behind that you've got some hardened foam, which is very easy to cut with a craft knife. Behind that there should be, I hope, it's a black plastic frame which holds the mounting points this way round at this end, that way round at that end, and the module should just clip straight up into it. There should be also a small square hole down at this end here, and that's where the cable connection goes through. I have no plans to take this headliner down. My plan is to run the cable plugged to the module. I'm going to run it up through the headliner. I'm going to use a piece of wire to push it down here and then all the way down the back of here to this point. This panel comes off and then I'll be able to route it from there by hand. So that's the plan. That's what I'm going to try and do. So a little bit like a surgeon, what I've done here is cut a little exploratory hole. I cut a very small one that was too small, I can't see what I'm doing. So I'll cut a larger one now, just with a straightforward craft knife. Nice rectangular hole, so if the worst comes to the worst and this all doesn't work out as a project, before I go any further, I'll be able to make something that covers this over and makes it look like I've meant to do it all along. You can see that this is already starting to come out of the headliner as a nice formed rectangle. So if you just have a look, you can see that there is some, you can actually see the formation of that headlining material now, including the backing board. So it looks like the backing board has cut away perfectly, just as I was hoping it would do. And then with this coming out, behind there, what you can see as you look inside the hole I've created is that there is a hard plastic bracket. This runs the entire length inside here, and it's within every one of the headliners, whether you have WHITEFIRE fitted or not. That plastic bracket has a slot at one end, a slot at the other end that the module clips straight into, and then it has a small square block shaped hole here, which the block slides into, that carries the wire, the connecting wire. The wire then has a ferrite module attached to it, and the wire clips in, turns 90 degrees, and then heads down that headliner, round the corner, and then down all the way down to the back of the car here. So you can see here that what I've done is I've cut a template out of paper, as I showed you, and I've overlaid that onto the headliner. I've had to kind of been very even about this. Used a bit of masking tape just to seal it, stick it up there, so I'm not doing any actual markings. And made that as even as I can where I've laid it out, and as centralised as possible. So as I'm cutting out the rest of this, you can see that I'm making the slot big enough to be the same size as the manufacturer slot, and you can see the rest of that bracket is now showing quite clearly through the headliner. And I can now feel that's the square shaped hole that I was looking for, and I'm nearly in a position where I'll be able to feel the two slot shaped holes. Once I've got that sorted, I'll be able to stop cutting, because as soon as you can reach those, you don't need to cut any further. And I've kept trying kind of inside the guidelines here, so that I'm not doing any more damage to the headliner than I need to do. And this is very much actually the same manufacturer process. I might need to tidy up the edges with the craft knife. And all I'm using, as I say, is a standard craft knife. It cuts through very, very simply. And if you look, you can now see this is how the headliner is made. Nice piece of soft fabric, some hard liner, layers of foam, and backed with cardboard underlay. So maybe not now as neat as the factory would do it, but not far off, to be honest. With a simple craft knife, as you can see, this hole has now been sliced open, and at this end you can see there is a slot that goes that way. Down at this end there is a slot that goes that way, and then there is a square shaped hole through here, which I'm poking my finger through, which allows you to route the cable out there and down the liner. This is the centre of the moulding. You can actually see the fixing point here. Sorry about the terrible camera work. But the fixing point underneath here. This is where the central holder is for the mount that holds the headliner up onto the roof. And if I just angle the camera a little bit more again, you can see in here there's the hole that I was on about. That's where the cable's going to go. So the next challenge you face when you're going to do this job is how you're going to get the wire through the hole and through and down the headliner. Well, it's actually going to go down the other side. It's on this side, and it needs to run down the back and round inside the headliner, and then all the way to the back of the headliner, so that we can get it down behind the scenes. So to save me having to bring the entire headliner down, I hit on the idea of snaggling the cable at this end and drawing it through the headliner. I took a look at some photos, and you'll be able to see when you look at the photos that I'm posting as part of this video, that on the officially factory installed version, the cable you'll find is glued to the headliner here, comes back, gets to about here, and then it turns and does a big loop, and then finishes off being stuck to the headliner about here, about halfway up, and then the rest of the cable sits off the back of the headliner, which makes me think it's going to come down in here somewhere. So to get the cable through the headliner, I started out with a piece of garden wire, nice roll of garden wire. It's nice and flexible, and then what I did was I had to do a bit of hit and miss, trying to figure out how you can get to the headliner here without bringing it down. Well, I started out looking above, where you can see there is a bit of flexible plastic trim, and I started above here wondering if I could thread in. So very quickly became apparent to me that actually what I want it to do is to sit inside the headliner here. So what I've done is I've started out at this point, and I took a piece of wire, slipped it under there, had to, a bit of trial and error, had to bend it in different ways, slipped it under there and ferreted it through so that I could get it to come in where there's a square hole under here. and managed to do that, and managed to pull this end through. Then I made the wire a very long piece, and managed to then slide it, and it's sitting, the rest of the wire is sitting inside this little gap here. And then I brought it back out, so it's out of the way of the sun blind, which is up here, which is going to come down. So I've then taken the other end of the wire and I threaded it through the back, and then just very, very gently made it as straight as possible, threaded it through, and it has come out at the other end, and you can see that I've got it at this end. So in theory, all I'm doing now, as you can see, is as I pull this end, I'm going to straighten up this wire so that it will sit all the way inside the headliner, and then I'm going to attach and twist this end here onto the cable so that the block is held securely by it. And the idea is that I'm going to pull that block through the hole, through the headliner, and as I pull the wire cable through, it should pull the cable around. I'll not have this this big loop shape, but I'm not sure I need that big loop shape anyway, other than picking up the slack. I'm not sure what function the loop itself would perform. Once I get the other end of the cable through here, then of course I can just draw through as much or little cable as I need, and then I'll figure out what to do at the other end of here with getting the connection worked down to where it needs to be. You can see I've already taken this panel. This is a single panel, by the way. The back of here was where this panel fitted. There's a couple of clips and bolts on the back of that. Nothing that you have to unscrew. It just pulls out at the top, pulls out at the bottom, and then wiggle it from the other end to slide it forward. You can see there's a little tooth that sticks into the parcel shelf at the back. So that's what got that panel out. I'd also caution you, any fingerprints that you leave, any sort of dirty finger marks, they are going to show on this headliner, so just make sure you keep your hands as clean as possible. You know, plastic gloves would be a good idea. At the very least, make sure that you're ready to clean this surface off when you're done with it. You know, any little marks, if you're very bothered about the quality of the job when it's finished, you need to make sure that stays nice and clean. So you can now see that I've threaded the wire in. It's all sitting inside the headliner. The other end is sitting down here at this end, ready to draw the cable through. So wish me luck. The next step is to just get this twisted around the block, the connector block at the end of the cable, and then give it a tug, and let's hope that it all works. If you're wondering what all the fuss is about, by the way, this is the WHITEFIRE module itself. This is what it looks like on the back. As you can see, it's a Jaguar markings. That's the unit. This tends to be the same sort of unit number in all cases. And there are also ones you can get for the Range Rover Evoque, Land Rover Discovery and Range Rover that are exactly the same module. They look the same. They have a different part number on here, but they are still branded Jaguar. And I have no reason to suspect that they do not also work exactly the same way. But this has come off a Jaguar XJ X351. So I was very fortunate to come across this with the cable. So this is the cable, this is the connector block for it, ferrite module on the wire, and then the wire is a very long wire which terminates with another block connector exactly the same. So what we're going to do is pull this end with the whole cable all the way through the headliner and bring it out at the back of the car. This cable is an LVDS, so you don't need to get too techie about this, but the way that this transmits infrared audio is to deliver quite high quality data transmission to where it connects in at this end here. And the end that connects is the one with the ferrite module. So that slots into the little block here. That block is actually this way round. You can see that will plug in, and then this module So if I plug it into place here, that module will sit with the ferrite block, it'll turn 90 degrees, and then this end of it will go up into the hole in the headliner, and then the rest of the cable will work its way all the way down. Once I've done that, these two tangs, this one that faces that way and this one that faces that way, with metal clips on them, slot up into the black plastic bracket which is inside the hole. And you can see, there you go, there's one of the slots at this end, there's the other slot at that end. Those two bracket ends will slot in, and literally it clips up into the headliner. It makes a nice clean connection and just looks like a nice shiny module sitting up in the roof. I'll just push it up into place so you can see how it looks when it's all fitted, and it goes up in there. So the trick is get this cable in. Once that has happened, I'll then go plug into the computer, go onto SDD and change some configuration files. I need to find out what those are, and that should enable and activate WHITEFIRE audio, so that when the dual view screen that's already fitted in here is activated, you can select audio only, or you can have audio and video, and that will play through some infrared headphones, which I also have, and you can pick those up quite cheaply on eBay now from the whole range of Land Rover, Range Rover vehicles that operate the WHITEFIRE system. They don't need special programming, the headphones, they all work with the module you've got. They work on a channel-based system. Some of them allow you to change channels, some of them don't, and we'll get to all of that later. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of just being really patient and taking your time. You can see that I've got the cable in now, up to a certain point. I've actually made some good progress. The block, the connector block, is now at this point on the corner. I need to get it round and under here. I've wound the blind forward, and it was quite tricky. Had to kind of work back and forth quite a bit to get the connector block over, because of course it's a lot thicker than everything else. I'm going to get a piece of metal, ferret it in there, work that connector block round the corner fully, and then make sure that it sits in this side here. I'm aware there could be connection points at the back here that it might snag on at any point, so you've just got to be really patient. It's a long, patient job, but I tell you, it'll be a lot easier than trying to take this entire headliner down, because once you start pulling away all these connector points, if just one of those doesn't work, you've got, you know, you're unbolting these, for instance, the grab handles at the back, they're held with a plastic bracket inside. Once you unbolt them, that will slide loose. Then you're going to have to find a way to get that all fitted back into place. Same thing with the connectors up at the front end. Same with the airbag connections. It turns into a huge job. So if I can manage to do this without taking the headliner down, I will be a happy bunny. Well, I won't say it wasn't challenging, but as you can see, all nice and neat as it should be into the back, and I've managed to get that cable through. So it means it can just be pulled through. You can hear it sliding along in the background as I'm sliding it through the headliner. Every now and then you'll see it's popping up in the wrong place, where this is. But that doesn't matter, because once it's actually installed, there'll be nothing holding it or getting in the way. The other end, as you can see, is connected to the module, and that's ready to be pushed up into the ceiling, at which point I will have installed the module. Then the remaining challenge will be how to get this end to the appropriate connection. It may plug straight into the audio amplifier module. Gonna have to look into the detail of exactly how this connects. This another day, because it's already, the light's starting to fail this evening, but I am gonna connect that, and I'll show you in a moment how that is when it's all properly connected. Just to round off this little section, as you can see, that's what the WHITEFIRE module looks like. Now it's installed, clip nice and firmly up there, makes nice smooth fit. Any of the cutting or trimming that I did of the headliner isn't visible. All the wiring is now safely installed. Put the panel back in, and you can see that I've just buried the wire so it can sit around there till I figure out what to do with that connecting part, where it actually physically connects to. And then it's only about coding and WHITEFIRE should be operational. As you can see, my car is back in one piece. The job is completed. If I just flip my camera around, you'll be able to see the WHITEFIRE module is installed. But this was interesting. I learned an awful lot about the interior of this car. One of the things I learned is that cable, whilst I thought it was very long, it was not as long as I thought. The cable didn't go where I thought it did, and that was an extremely painful experience. Routing that cable required me to get it from the headliner, bring it round the back of here, but actually to come down this pillar and not down the back. Then I had to get it round the back of this seat, so I had to take out all of this, all the pillar at the back, had to take out this back seat, take out this panel, all this panel, all this section at the back as well, which you've already seen in the previous video. Had to take this panel out, had to take the weather strip off the door, had to remove the seat squab, had to remove the seat back. And all of this was because the wire runs down here, inside here, and then needed to come down this pillar, not all the way into the back, as I thought it would do. So I had to come down this pillar, and then behind this seat, around about here, there is the only access panel to take you into the boot. What you may not know about these cars is that as part of the integral structure of the car, there is a metal bulkhead behind this seat. So you can't fold the seats down, you can't put anything into the boot. It's absolutely solid. And other than starting to drill into the aluminium bodywork of the car, which I would not recommend, the only access panel I could find was a small circular grommet, which I removed, and which gave me access ultimately into the boot. So the cable came down here, through that grommet, and then into the boot of the car. That's where it connects, and it connects into the audio amplifier, and I'll show you where that goes to. So after the hellish job I had installing that cable, I am not about to dismantle this again, but I will tell you that this interior panel here had to be pulled out onto one side. Behind it, inside here, inside the bodywork of the car, is where the amplifier sits, and there is a connection in the amplifier, and that's where the WHITEFIRE cable has to plug in. So I had to route it all the way in, round the inside of here, and plug it in. First time I did that, I got it just slightly wrong in the alignment, and it was about 1.5 inches too short. So I had to take it all the way out and then all the way back in. I tried routing it under the parcel shelf, because you can see under here that you have 2 speakers, and there are some sort of holes in the metalwork up here that allow you to come in. But by the time you've done that, you've used up too much of the cable for it to reach across. So don't waste your time doing what I did. The final tip and piece of advice and this is where it really is up to you, is fitting this ultimately was a real nightmare, because I can guess that the engineers at Jaguar made a terrible mistake with this car. The reason I say that is because the cable comes in, and then with a ferrite core attached to the cable, it then turns 90 degrees in order to clip it. Anybody with any common sense would have designed this module so that the cable would come in and plug in that way round. The fact that it has to turn 90 degrees and has a thick ferrite core clipped around the cable, which is to reduce radio interference, that makes it quite thick, which then makes it very, very hard to press this up high enough to clip it into the bodywork. It took me a lot of effort and a lot of tries to succeed with that. And ultimately I decided to remove the ferrite core. The ferrite core is designed to reduce the amount of electromagnetic interference that comes away from this module, by the way, not what affects it directly. and it's your choice whether you want to do what I did and remove it. Basically, it's got a couple of little clips on it which you pull, and it's a little cylinder which pops open and comes off the cable. There's no cutting, there's no messing about with it. I decided to remove it. It just made more sense, and I was getting quite irate about the fact that my car was still in bits. If you had seen this car yesterday, all of this seat was out, all of the interior was out, and it looked an absolute mess, including you have to remove this plate here, you have to remove the trim all the way around the door, which, as you can see, actually, if I just pull that away, you can see it actually comes off the bodywork. That's the weather strip. You have to remove this interior panel, which unclips with a couple of clips on down here, and has a central fastener which you pull out, and you have to be careful not to snap those and keep them safe to one side. The seat back has to come off, which has two straps underneath it, which you have to pull simultaneously. That releases two latches at the tops of the seat, and then allows you to lift the whole section forwards. The seat squab at the bottom, because these are the heated and cooled seats, has a couple of multi-connectors under here which need to be unplugged, and a couple of multi-connectors at the other end. There are four little tabs, triangular tabs, which you have to get your finger on. They're hidden under here, you won't be able to see them, you just have to feel for them, and you twist them. They're on a spring, you twist them until they unclip, and you'll feel each section of the seat. There's one here, one there, and one at the end, and you'll see those you'll see the seat loosen as you unfasten each one of those. Then you can lift that whole seat squab out, run this forwards. The seat belt stays inside this module, but the whole seat belt unit slides forward, and that gets you access to another carpeted area here which has got metal behind it. The fuse box sits in the middle. In case you're not aware of this, behind this little section here, that's where all the fuses for the car are. So there's lots of fuses and wiring sitting behind this seating, and some of the wiring goes to the heating and cooling elements and the fan that sits on each one of these seats at the back. So yeah, it was a huge job to take the car up to pieces, and you might question whether you want to do that just in order to be able to get an infrared audio system, but I have to say, delighted that I managed it.